Yeah. It's like, go for it. It's really not back. Okay, all three cameras are rolling.
Welcome back to week 5, and this is titled The Laugh. So we're kind of looking at a picture of Sarah and her shift from cynicism, laughter in her skepticism of God's promise, and she ends up in this place of laughter and joy and celebration over what God's done. So in this section of Genesis in the story, we see these travelers who came with a message for Sarah. And there's a couple of things I think are interesting about this is that God came for Sarah. It was Abraham's promise, right? But God came for Sarah with a message for her and words for her. And God met her in a place of a personal engagement. Like it wasn't just this ethereal sort of message and promise that Abraham's delivering to his wife, but it's God coming in a personal way. And I think there's some discussion around that we can have about the way that God meets us in personal places. And so let me just start there. You know, I think our perception of spirituality and God can be so ethereal and can be so invisible and so out of touch and so distant. Yeah, I know in my life I've had these personal moments where God has met me. And it's usually in places of need or places of pain. I remember a moment when I was just sort of having just this crisis of spirituality and driving in my car and really just praying to the sky of God, if you're there, would you just show me? And I don't know if you've ever had a moment like that where it's like, where are you, God? But it's like, God, if you're really there, will you just show me? And I didn't have a flash from the sky, but just this overwhelming sense of the presence of God just met me in that moment and just washed over my life. And this sort of message from the Lord saying, no, I'm here. I'm with you. Guess what? My situation didn't change. I was still in it. But just this moment of the Lord just washing over me. And I'll just never forget that time. Have you ever had a time where the Lord has met you in a really personal place or a personal way?
I have.
Yeah, tell us about it.
Well, it's just a quick story. Back in, I was working at Yellow Freight. I'd been there for a long time, and I was in marketing there. And they brought in this guy that's going to fix everything, and he cuts several layers of management, and I don't know how I got caught up in that. I didn't think I would, but I did. And I just had to turn in everything, and the guy gave me a ride home, and I just went to the bedroom and got on my knees, and I said, you have my attention. And I thought, well, I've got a good reputation. I'll just sit back and wait for the phone to ring. Well, it went on for a month there, and the phone didn't ring. And I thought, wow. I remember laying in bed. I woke up one night, and I was laying there, and I thought, maybe I'm not marketable. And out of the blue, Ephesians 3:20 came to me. And now unto him who's able to do exceedingly abundantly above all you ask or think. That verse just came to me. And I thought, oh my goodness. The Lord took time to answer me right there. He was saying, I got a plan, hold on. Well, he did. He had a good plan. I've never forgotten that.
The promise of God.
Yeah, powerful.
Yeah.
I had a situation once. I was like newly living on my own, young adult, just like figuring finances out, right? And just super stressed about if I was doing the right things, working a couple part-time jobs and all of that kind of stuff. And I was at Aldi, like shopping for groceries, and it was just like making me more stressed because I knew I was going to be spending money. And I wasn't paying attention to what I was putting in my cart as far as like how much it cost. But when I checked out, like my total was the exact amount of cash I had in my wallet. And it just like hit me so hard, like that God knows exactly what I need, you know? And I just will never forget that. That was so formative for me. And just all that anxiety that I felt, like, well, I still felt some stress. It just, like, I just felt like I could have a sigh of relief just knowing that God was going to meet me in that.
I can recall a moment when life was really hard, and I was dealing with an onset of some pain with I had a surgery that caused a lot of chronic pain for me, and I couldn't take care of myself. I couldn't fix myself something to eat for a year. And I'm going to doctors and specialists and, you know, all of this stuff, and no one can figure out what's wrong with me, and I'm just quite literally withering away. My entire family was concerned, I was concerned, and I just recall this moment of just laying down and feeling completely broken. And I'm seeking God in this whole time, and I remember just this really, it was a very beautiful moment. I apologize if I get a little emotional, but I just had nothing left. And I just said, God, I just need you to do something. I just need you to move. And that's what I needed in that moment. And after that, I didn't really have anything else to say. And so I just began to worship. And I just put on worship music, and I just began to worship. And it was in that place that it wasn't some big epiphany. It wasn't some big revelation of who God was in that moment. It was just enough of a tender love and care from Him that got me through. And even though it was a still small voice, it was enough for me to keep going, to keep fighting. And eventually, you know, I got to healing, and I find the doctors that diagnosed me properly. And but I will always, always, always remember that moment. Even though it wasn't this big thing, it was powerful. Just being that still small voice of being there for me in that moment.
How about you, Elena? Has God ever met you in a personal way in your life?
Yeah. When I was really young, I was probably like 8 or 9 years old. I grew up in church, and I grew up going to a small church that my grandfather ran for as long as I can remember. And for 3 years of my time there, I was sexually abused and molested by a leader in that church. And so it kind of just like rocks your entire foundation of like what God's promises to you. And like as a young kid, like you have adults telling you like how much Jesus loves you and like how He wants these things for you. And at the same time, I was walking through what I would consider probably the darkest time of my life and trying to navigate that as a kid while my grandfather was the pastor of the church. And so like in so many ways, like my trust had been betrayed. And then as a young kid, just trying to navigate like what was happening to me. Of course, everybody wants to help, right? And so there's all of these people that just want you to retell your story and want you to answer all these questions because they want to help you and they want, you know, this person to be held accountable. And I remember like after so many forensic interviews and so many times of talking to different people, like I remember I was having a conversation with my dad, and he was just talking to me, and he was like, Elena, like, what do I do? And I think that's so interesting, like a dad asking a young child, like, what do I do? But I just remember having this overwhelming sense of peace wash over me. And I remember I said to him, I was like, Dad, like, what he did to me was wrong, But I want to forgive him. Like, I want to move on from this. And still to this day, like, I don't understand, like, why those words came out of my mouth. But ever since then, I just had this overwhelming sense of peace. And I know now, sitting here as an adult, I know that that was the Lord, that was the Holy Spirit working through me. But at such a young age in my life, like, that's a moment that I go back to. Because that's not something that, like, a young kid should be thinking about or processing, something like that. So that's how I know that that was a moment that I go back to, and I'm like, that was from the Lord.
Yeah. Wow. I love that. I mean, not your story, but I love that the Lord met you where you needed him. You know, and I don't know, as I talk to people, it seems like that can be a perception that we have of God, that he's just this institutional, distant, cosmic thing. But here we are sitting in a circle, and we all have these stories to tell of where God meets us in these really personal, intimate ways.
I love in this story of Sarah, like, she laughs, like, scoffing what she's hearing from the Lord. But then, like, the redemption is the laughter of joy. And, like, Isaac's name literally means laughter. And so I just feel like it's, again, like we've been talking about, a journey to promise. Like, even our worst behaviors, our hardest experiences, like, God can literally redeem those to the point of, like, almost you wearing it as your name, but not in the pain, but in the redemption.
Yes. Yeah.
Definitely, for sure. I'm sitting here laughing because, like I said, that was I'm never going to work at a church. Like, I'm never going to, like, tap into my faith or anything like that. And
Look at you now.
here I am. I planned my career to do all the things to fight, the people that had wronged me. Like, that was my goal. It never was to, like, God can redeem my story and I can walk with people who have been through the kind of hurt that I have. It was always like, are you calling me? It's never going to be me. Like, in fact, don't call on me, not me. I'm not the one. So.
Well, I do love that line, that God doesn't cause our pain, but he doesn't waste it either, And these stories that we share, I mean, I just, I draw faith from it. I draw faith from your story and your story. And there's something about that as we do that together that I think there's real joy and faith that's imparted to us. So the Lord is faithful. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for sharing. And I think that's where we'll end things and send it back to our small groups.